It is deeply controversial, and yet word from a conference in Italy is that more priests are to be trained in exorcism. Exorcism. According to the Catholic Church, it's the eviction of demons and other evil spirits from a person's body. Father Cesare Trucchi is one of 500 priests trained by the Vatican to expel the devil.
One person coming per week telling me that they have problems.
Now reports say there are plans to train even more priests after a threefold increase in the demand for exorcisms in Italy alone, 500,000 per year. Just outside of Madrid, Father Jose Fortilla used to be the only exorcist in Spain. He says he would see the tortured, like this woman, from dawn to dusk, reading scriptures and praying over them. While all the while, he says, the devil fights to stay in control.
I pray for somebody and he begin to vomit, to have a terrible pain in his chest or something in his head. Something is there, something that is not ordinary, something that is extraordinary.
Some say extraordinary characteristics, like supernatural strength, make it possible to separate the mentally ill from the possessed. But skeptics say the two have been confused through the years.
The vast majority of people who believe they are possessed are medically or mentally ill. The vast majority.
And more exorcism training is planned very soon for a practice that still divides people, divides them between science and religion, and understanding what's really going on in the human mind.
Father, we seem to be seeing an explosion in demand for, pardon the crude term, your services as an exorcist. Why do you think we're seeing this increase in both attention as well as perhaps authentic possession now rather than years before?
People oftentimes ask me, is there a greater sense of evil in the world today? My response always is, I think that I don't know that the devil has upped his game, but I think more people today are willing to play the devil's game. You know, faith in God will lead us in one direction, the lack of faith will lead us in another, and certainly faith is on decline in the lives of many people.
What are some of the portals or doorways? I mean, demonic possession, more often than not, doesn't just come upon ambushes as we're walking home in the evening. There are ways that the devil enters in, yes?
Yes, there are. And
what would those be?
And as an exorcist, that would be the main thing I would look for. What's the entry point? Such as ties to the occult. Maybe somebody has been cursed. Somebody's been dedicated to a demon. One hasn't invited a demon in. Broken relationships, a life of habitual sin. These are primarily the ways I think that people can invite evil in.
Wow. Tell me for a moment about, we've been seeing a lot of cult-like activity. I talked to friends of mine in law enforcement, and they've been finding dead animals all over the place, beheaded animals. Do you see this as a rise in the occult, in whether it's animal sacrifice or some kind of santeria or this Santa Muerte, this movement in Mexico? What are we seeing here in the United States?
I think what we're seeing is that because faith is in decline in the lives of so many people, even millennials, I think I read recently that 70% of millennials no longer profess any religious affiliation whatsoever. So as belief in God is deteriorating, there seems to be a growing fascination with these occult practices.
And you think it's filling that void?
It is, because I think the human person has that innate desire for something more. Of course, I would agree with Augustine that, you know, our hearts are restless, O Lord, until they rest in you. But when people have rejected God, they're trying to fill that in with something else.
Tell me for a moment, Father Gabriel Amorth, at the time Rome's chief exorcist, now deceased, he said ISIS is Satan. He was talking about the Islamic State and the way they're manifesting throughout the Middle East, and that this is a manifestation of satanic activity. Would you agree with that?
Well, one would have to say, what is Satan all about? He's about division and hatred and violence. So to that degree, the answer would be yes, because as Christians, we believe that Christ came to create community. He gave us the church. But you look at groups like that, and they're all about violence again, and hatred, and tearing things apart.
And death, yeah, and chaos.
And have you seen an increase in the need for exorcists since you've been doing this?
Absolutely, and that need is due to the paganization of Western culture, right? So with the abandonment of Christendom and Christianity as being the worldview of Western society. So, you think about 70 years ago, American society, Canadian society, Mexican society, it's that French society, we were Christian. That's what we were, right? That was the dominant worldview. It affected our laws. It affected our public morality. It affected every aspect of life. Well, that worldview has been eclipsed. And so with a secular / pagan worldview, now what we have is demons don't have those, the fences have been torn down. And people are now dabbling because they lack a moral compass. They lack a worldview to give them a kind of protection as to how to deal with the occult realm and how to deal with evil in general. And most people don't even believe that the devil exists. And so, what's wrong with contacting a fortune teller just for kicks? What's wrong with going and getting a Reiki session at my local spa? What's wrong with joining the Freemasons? What's wrong with using a Ouija board or dabbling in some other occult act, right? Well, what you're doing is you are giving permission for the demons to latch on to you.
Now, most people that you encounter, if I'm not mistaken, they don't start off by saying, "Today I would like to become possessed by a demon." What are the steps? These are things that happen without people's full awareness. I don't want to say without their consent, because I think that there has to be an element at some point of consent. But what do you see as some of the most common ways that people allow demonic influence into their lives?
Yeah. So the most common, it come down to two. One, I've already mentioned, is an act of the occult. So dabbling with the Ouija board, tarot cards, astrology, or so forth. And why is that? Because it is a direct violation of the first commandment, which in the first commandment, we are denying the right of God to be God. And in so doing, there's an implicit declaration, I am God. I am going to bypass the limits that he has imposed on me in reality. So the limits whereby, my knowledge is curtailed of hidden events. Well, I'm going to go get that knowledge. Where my power has been limited in that I'm unable to physically attack somebody without consequence. So I'm going to spiritually attack them by way of a curse. So in doing this kind of thing and violating the first commandment, we are replicating the rebellion of Satan and his fallen angels. Right? That is an act of divine rebellion, right? A rebellion against God and his law. So that makes you, that repetition of the sin of Satan makes you his personal property. You belong to the devil in the state of sin. And in that particular sin, you are configuring yourself to his heart. And that makes you really, it not only gives him rights to possess, but it makes you really appealing as to be his own property and possession. The second type of sin, whereby possession most commonly occurs, is through sexual sin. And why is that? Because the sexual faculty within a human being is the most beautiful one. It is the one by which we most resemble God. A man and woman come together in an act of love, and that act of love is so strong that 9 months later, they will have to give it a name. And so that way by which we participate in creation with God is something so beautiful. There is no more beautiful human activity. Because of that beauty, the devil is going to be all over it, trying to mar it and disfigure it.
That's a very poor argument. That's a very poor argument. Sure.